Okay, so arrays, this is really important. There are a few different types of arrays, but let's start with the very basic. So I deleted everything in exercise 1.php, and I'm starting on PHP. One thing that I didn't teach you yet is actually at the end of the file, if all of your file is going to be PHP code, I actually don't need to put this. I can actually just leave it empty, and it's actually going to work just fine. But well, I'm not sure why I said it. But okay, well, let's just still put it in. All right, so let's create a variable called students, and this I'm going to say is an array. An array can hold multiple data, multiple information. Now let's say there was 3 students, and I can add new information in the students array, and this just means for the next value in the array, for the next row in the array, put this string. So I can do that, do the same thing, and then I can add John, Michael, and let's say Charles. Make sure you have a semicolon at the end. Every single letter is important. And then I can say, for example, student 0. So let's do this. Student 0 is and student 1, 2. Okay, and let me just run it, and then let me explain what happens. Okay, so student 0 is John, student 1 is Michael, and student 2 is Charles. So basically, the first value in the array is the 0th index. In programming, the first number is 0, it's not 1. This is how it works. So with the the first value is again the 0th index. That's the 1 index. That's 2 index. Okay, this really means it's the first element, second element, and third element. But again, in programming, the first number usually is always 0. That's just how it works. Okay, all right. So remember that I said in the students array, put that John as the new information for the array, put Michael as the new information, put Charles as the new information. And when it added new information, it automatically assigned John to be the 0th index, Michael to be the 1 index, and Charles to be the 2nd index, and so forth. So that's one way to create information in the array. There is another way, is to do array, and then inside this array, I can pass certain value. So I can say John, Michael, Charles. And this would do exactly the same thing as what I have done over here. Okay, you usually do this. You will see both of this, so get familiar with both. And in PHP again, I can do this, or I can put some spacing in between. As long as I have a semicolon at the end, PHP doesn't care if you have multiple lines or whatnot. In other languages, it will care, but in PHP, as long as you have a semicolon at the end, that's okay. Okay, so let me make that a little bit smaller so you guys can see. And then again, I can do the same thing here. And this one is called students 2, and then it would do exactly the same thing. Okay, now this is looking pretty confusing, so let's do echo h1 student array. I'm just echoing out an h1 tag, and this one I'll do students 2 array, and it prints out the exact same thing. So echo is one thing that you're going to be using a lot. There's also another function called var_dump, and if I do this, it's going to display everything about that variable. So let's do this. And to make it more readable, I'm going to add a break statement so that it just adds, so that it's more readable. Okay, saved it. All right. So remember, we just did a var_dump students. So it means that in the var_dump, in the students variable on the 0th index, it has a string that's four characters and has a value of John. In the first index is going to have a string. It has a string of 7 characters, which is Michael. That's the value that's stored in 1, and so forth. var_dump, you're going to use it a lot to debug. It's really, really nice. So make sure you understand how to use var_dump. Alright, so this is how you create a variable and how you assign value in the array. Okay, and then also you can go over the examples below and make sure you understand it. Okay, so now here is another concept. So I'm going to delete this. I'm expecting you to type this as you watch the video. All right, so let's create another variable called shops. I'm going to have this be an array. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to, in this array, it's actually going to store arrays of arrays. Okay, so I'm going to create array that has this information, has 3 information, and shops is going to be an array that contains 3 rows of arrays. Okay, so this one I'll say Daisy. Okay, okay. So shops is an array that has 3 arrays. The first row in that array is going to be an array that has this info. That's the second row, and then the third row. Okay, so let's just do var_dump shops, and if I do this, notice that, and sometimes if I click on view page source, it's cleaner. See, okay, so it's displaying the shops. Shops on the 0th row, it has an array that has 3 values. So rows 1.25, 15. Okay, so it has 3 rows, right? 1, 2, 3. Right? The 0th index, the first index, well, the 0th index, first index, and then the second. Okay, index 2. Index 0, index 1, index 2. Okay, so I can have arrays. An array can have multiple rows of arrays. So I hope that makes sense. All right. Now, if I wanted to get the value of the index 0 and then get the index 0 of that index 0, okay, this is going to print out rows. Okay, so 0 means that's the index 0, which is the first row, and then it's going to look further and it's going to call, say, the 0th index of that 0th row, which is going to return rows. And if I do shops 0, 1, this is going to print out 1.25, right? Because that's index 1, index 2, okay, and so forth. I can do echo shops 2, 2, and this is going to print out 0th row, first row, index 2, 0, 1, 2. So this is going to print out 15. Okay, so just make sure you understand how this works. Now, just like in the previous example, there's another way that I can create this array, right? And how could I have done that? I could have done this, right? I can just say shops is going to be an array. And in the first row, in the new row for shops, just have it contain, for example, this information. Okay, and then create another row in shops, and for this, let's have it be like, I don't know, Coding Dojo. Let's just have that be a shop. 1.1, 23, and I can do hi 1.0, 23, no, 20, and then I can also do var_dump shops. Okay, so I can either have these rows of arrays in the array declaration like I did over here, or you could just do shops is going to be an array and then manually specify what each row of the shops array is going to contain. So this is super important that you understand how the arrays work and how you can retrieve different values in the arrays. So make sure you understand it. Now you can have 3-dimensional arrays, 4-dimensional, but in programming you will just most likely just use up to 2-dimensional. Alright, so that's how you create multi-dimensional arrays. Now there's also something called associative arrays. So I'm going to delete this. So let's now learn about associative arrays. Because I want this video to be short, let me just kind of explain. Okay, so this is how I can declare an array. And I can say, okay, the first name, that's going to be a key. and it's going to store the information Michael in that key. And then I can say I'm going to have another key in that array, and it's going to have the value Choi. So if I do echo student's first name, then it will print out Michael. If I do echo student's last name, it will print out Choi. Okay. The fourth step is multi-dimensional arrays with associative arrays. So again, I can have arrays of arrays, right? Arrays of associative arrays. So that's an array. So I'm going to store that as the index 0, or the first row for students array, and that's going to store that's going to be the second row, or index 1, right? So if I do student 0, which means the 0th row, and then I can print out the first name, and this is going to print out John. So make sure you understand this, type this, and then play around with it, and make sure you feel totally comfortable with how you can set arrays and how you can retrieve values in the arrays. Alright, good luck.